Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ask an Architect. I'm here with my friend Wandile, who's been very involved in the AIS in the past. I'm so glad to be speaking with him today and sharing kind of his insights with all of you. So, Wandile, if you could tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do, we'd love to hear it.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Yeah, my name is Wandile Mthiyane. I'm from Durban, South Africa. I am an Obama leader. I'm an architect, and I think the best way to describe it would be I'm an entrepreneur. I dabble in a few projects, but all my work is centered around this idea of giving dignity a home. What does that mean? I think everyone is born with a God-given intrinsic value and dignity. So when we, for example, with our architecture Ubuntu Design Group in South Africa, design and build a home for a family that either lives in a shack or an informal settlement, we are not giving them dignity by building them a home. We're restoring the dignity that they already have, right? So when we work with workplace inclusion, with architecture firms, we're not, what we're doing there is we're creating a non-physical home of belonging, right? So my whole sort of spiel and work is centered around this idea, like how do we help people belong? How do we help people feel at home? And how do we give dignity at home?
Yeah, I think that's so important. And I think maybe it may be a slightly different architectural approach than some other architects may take or some other firms may take. So I guess I'm curious to know kind of what you think are the most important qualities that an architect should have.
Ooh, that's a great question. I think the fundamental quality is humility. The idea of understanding that no one knows best where they're going to live than the person who's actually going to live there. Um, so that helps you best create solutions that are contextual, but also meet the needs of the people who are going to live there. I think sometimes as architects, we get carried away and we forget that these aren't our houses or our buildings, but they're for whoever we're doing it for. So just putting people first. I think the former VP for AIS used to have a saying, Obi Okolo, he used to have a saying that went, architecture is just a frame and people are the big picture. I think if you get that in architecture, I think you're halfway through. And then I think the other one is more on sort of being a good steward of your time and sort of like finances, because I think sometimes we can get carried away about the design and undercut ourselves, which affects us financially and our families, etc. Sort of being able to sort of balance the service and the business end of the work you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's some extremely profound kind of thought, and definitely not one that a ton of architects have. So I'm curious, maybe if you want to tell us a little bit more about maybe your educational background or kind of what inspired you to pursue a career in architecture, just to give us all some context about how we can be so cautious and so thoughtful in the way that we practice architecture.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Yeah, so I grew up in one of the informal settlements in South Africa amongst many different neighborhoods. So I lived across sort of the whole stratosphere of sort of different income, from low income, middle income, and higher income. But I think some of my best times was living in an informal settlement or a shack. But I also realized that during that time, I was having fun making a soccer ball out of plastic and playing with my friends and all this stuff. But my parents were constantly stressed because at any point, if it rained too hard, that mud brick home could fall on us, or if it was too windy, etc. But it was at that very young age that I realized that at the core and the center of uh, the problem within low-income communities was the lack of dignified housing, because without a dignified home, you don't have a physical address. Without a physical address, you you can't apply for a job. Without a job, you don't have money. Without money, you can't build a home, to create a vicious cycle of poverty. I also saw that like if water seeps into the mud brick home, it causes asthma. So my siblings would get sick, or so it affects healthcare, right? or that, if you're living in a 1 or 2 room home, there really isn't space for you to do homework. So it affects education. So at the core of, you know, the issues within low income communities was this lack of dignified housing. So from that very young age, I decided that I want to be an architect. In that time, I said a businessman because I didn't know what an architect was because everyone built their own home. But effectively, I think that's why I made the decision. I want to be an architect so that I can change that. And that's how I started the Ubuntu Design Group whilst in college to start designing and building homes for families who come from similar contexts as I did at that point. So that was my journey. And my, I guess, relationship with AIS was I was the president of the Andrews University School of Architecture chapter, I think in 2016.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much for kind of the context. And I know kind of as of recently you've moved a little bit into kind of nonprofit work and kind of work that's architecture adjacent. Do you have anything maybe that you'd like to share about that work that you've been doing?
Yeah, so no, I'm excited about the project I'm working on right now is grindtea.com. That is grindtea.com. So basically, right now there's no way of knowing what an architecture firm's experience is actually going to be like until you go work there. I remember when I was in college, doing my master's and doing my undergrad, we were always freaking out. It's like, am I going to make it at the architecture firm? We were always freaking out about the culture. Is it going to be discriminatory? Is it going to be a good fit? But there was no real measure of what that looks like. And according to Glassdoor, it says that 3 in 4 job seekers are looking for an inclusive workplace, but there's no barometer. So my team and I have worked with Harvard and Columbia social psychologists and have created this platform where folks, current employees, can rate their workplaces on how inclusive or not they are. Um, and then even past employees can also rate so that people like us who are recent graduates, who are in between jobs, who are looking for their next career can be able to go to this platform and search the architecture firm they're looking to apply for and see if the culture aligns with what they're looking for. So this is broken down into key indicators. So whether it's be maternity leave, it's compensation, valued expression, all of the things that are important to you, you can now check before submitting that application so that you know that you're going to a firm where you are truly valued. So this helps a lot of women, a lot of people of color who are often the ones to be most affected by this. So I'm really excited about this and how it's revolutionizing and creating inclusive workplaces within architecture.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's kind of a big discussion going on right now about kind of labor in architecture and what that looks like and kind of unions and all this fun stuff. So I think it's a really needed and really helpful initiative. Do you mind telling us a little bit more about anti-racist hot dog as well? I just want to make sure we're covering all our bases.
Yes, yes. I actually have it on my back here. The anti-racist hot dog. So the anti-racist hot dog is a diversity, equity, and inclusion consultancy that we run, where we help architecture firms build cultures of inclusion. Because look, at the end of the day, we can't design inclusive spaces if we don't first have inclusive workplaces, right? Like the things we design are a product of who we are. If we are inherently not inclusive, the projects are not going to be inclusive. And I think architects don't realize that we have such a great responsibility because the work we design outlives us, right? So we're still living in buildings that were built during the Victorian era and, etc. Everyone from that area is dead, but the buildings are still there, right? So if we design for redlining, if we design for apartheid architecture, 70 or even 100 years later, those communities will still be affected by the work that we do. So we think it's important, it's imperative that architecture firms and even architecture studios within the architecture school can sort of incorporate inclusion and diversity and understanding other cultures into their curriculum. So that's what we do. We help schools and we help architecture firms to think about and design for inclusion. And that, as a result, results in inclusive architecture.
Yeah, I think you raise a phenomenal point. And maybe kind of following up to that, what kind of approaches do you think, in addition to that, more inclusion and more community can also allow us to create architecture that strengthens communities instead of, breaks them apart or fosters more social interaction for a better knit community. Do you have any thoughts about kind of an approach or any like thoughts that you'd like to share?
100%. The Ubuntu design group approach is it's really in three parts. It's listening to build, building to enable, and enabling Ubuntu. What does this mean? Listening to build is fundamentally accepting the premise that no one knows best where they're going to live than the person who's actually going to live there. So we're not coming in as the expert. We may be the technical experts on how to bring the vision to fruition, but we're not the living experts, right? So really letting the family or the community sort of drive the direction of that particular design. And this is really sad because I think a lot of architects do this well when they're designing for rich and paying clients. But when it comes to affordable housing, we feel like it's okay to build these cookie cutter skies on the wall, which leads to ghettos, and then they need to be demolished 50 years, down the line. Or, folks who design these affordable housing projects in the middle of nowhere. And then 10 years down the line, that place has highest crime rates, highest high school dropout rates, highest pregnancy rates. And then we look at it on CNN and say, oh, what is wrong with those people? No, what is wrong with the architects who designed it? Because they've designed it for failure. And that's what's happening. Then people are living them. And then so building to enable is like, could a house be more than just a house? Could it be also a home with a commercial space? That's the Ubuntu home model where we design and build a home for a family need with the commercial space. Because at the end of the day, the family wants to eat a house, right? So how do we create employment? How do we create income? They can rent that space out as an Airbnb. They can also run a business out of it. So could a house be more than a home? Could we enable finance? Could we enable commerce, etc.? And then enabling Ubuntu, which is our start step, it's never about the house or the school or the church or the park. It's about all of those things coming together to create a really livable, sustainable neighborhood. And the reason why a lot of affordable housing projects fail is because there are these isolated housing communities without any access to, resources, parks, school, etc. And as a result, it leads to a lot of problems that we see within these communities. So it's listening to build, building to enable, and enabling Ubuntu.
Yeah,
And
that's
Ubuntu is a
fantastic.
Zulu word. My bad. Sorry, Ubuntu is a Zulu word that means I am because we are. So enabling community.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fantastic. Thank you so much for kind of sharing that with everyone listening and watching. You mentioned kind of affordable housing and how to kind of make that happen in your approach. I was just curious, do you have any experience maybe collaborating with communities or policymakers or developers, and how to kind of work all those things together to make sure that they're kind of meeting the community's needs? I'd love to hear what your experiences are like doing that and if you have any thoughts.
It's a great question. And also, honestly, the hardest question because I don't think I've figured it out yet. It's a long trial and error process. But there's a new model we're working on right now. We had pitched a micro mortgage bank model with the banks in South Africa in 2020, and just COVID happened and everyone passed on us. And we were heartbroken because we had worked on that chain for years and sort of moved on. But 2 months ago, we got a call from one of the biggest banks in South Africa. Like, hey, maybe you guys were onto something. Could we relook at that? So we're back at that, and the idea is creating down payment free mortgages. So where we can design and build a home sort of upfront, and then the person sort of moves in the same way you move into an apartment, but instead of renting, they're paying rent to own. So that's a model we're working with. I haven't had the greatest experiences working with governments and stuff, so I probably not the best person to ask questions on that. So I try to stay away from them. Um, and I got rejected from an Obama Scholars Program because I told him that I think that policy is not the solution for most things. Because I think that, look, people have been writing policies for years, and a lot of policies are great, but it's just books collecting dust in some government office. So I'm more on real sort of like, let's just do it and see what works and what doesn't, and kind of take it from there. So that's my approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good kind of thought process on leadership that you're not just signing on to something just because somebody important asked you to sign on to it, or agreeing or disagreeing is a pretty brave thing to do. So do you have any thoughts maybe on how or advice maybe you want to give to the students or emerging professionals that are watching and listening about kind of how they can pave their own way as a leader and how to kind of practice some of the same things?
True. And maybe to answer the policy one again, I think policy is important. um, I just think within my context, it doesn't make as much sense. So advice for other sort of upcoming AIS folks, I think, look, I've been working on this idea of giving dignity at home for the past 9 years. Many of those 9 years, I've seen my friends get hired in firms, rise up in positions. Feel I've feel it has felt like I've been left behind, right? And obviously you get that pressure from your family, just society, Instagram, etc. But 9 years later, I, I'm talking about my 20s. I'm turning 30 next year. 9 years later, I couldn't be more proud of the journey that I chose, because I got to stay true to myself. And a lot of those friends who, weren't traditional, which is great for them. Some, they did it because they thought that's what was needed. A lot of the people who reach out to me for advice about how to stay true to self and how to navigate a lot of things, right? So high risk will always come with high reward, right? So through that, I've won several awards, became an Obama Fellow, etc. But I had to sort of go on a path that was unpaved and paved for myself, and that comes with a lot of hurdles that you have to sort of like pave through. But yeah, man, I'm ultimately like I'm grateful, and the impact we've made is beautiful to watch. There's people who've gone on to study architecture because of the work that I was doing. So that's crazy, you know what I mean? And now we're doing this thing with grindt.com where we're helping transform workplace cultures, and you all can go and rate your past workplaces or find your next job. So for me, if the only advice I would say is like stay true to yourself, whatever that is, even if it looks crazy for others, um, stay true to yourself. You will thank yourself later.
Yeah, and I just say myself and also everyone at the AIS is so proud of everything that you've accomplished, Wandile. If you ask me, you're an AISer through and through, and you've kind of upheld design, leadership, and service in everything that you've done, and you've been kind of uncompromising in that endeavor. So I think that's amazing. And I
Thank
kind of
you.
look forward to seeing everything you'll be doing in the future. I just wanted to throw that in there.
I appreciate and I appreciate that. And I think maybe this is a good point to me to mention is that like I think a lot of who I am now started with AIS. I think AIS was the first organization to give me the permission to lead. I don't think we necessarily need permission to lead, but AIS gave that permission to lead when I thought I did, right? But not only to lead, it gave me the permission to be myself, right? So seeing other young folks doing amazing stuff. So at the time, President Charlie Cletcher, and then there was, Joel Pomonville, um, Quad, Forum, just like going to those places, coming back invigorated, saying, oh, there's so much more to the world than my little studio. And I can actually be the change today. I don't have to wait till tomorrow. I think AIS emboldened me to believe in myself and think the crazy idea that I thought I could change the world. And as a result of that, I've being able to do all of these things, become an Obama fellow, etc., etc. So definitely shout out, and I'm excited for all of you who are currently going through that experience.
Thank you so much. It means so much to us that you kind of started out as a leader in the AIS and you also serve as a kind of example for all of our students that they are able to do good in the world. You're kind of an example to me of where I want to be and things that I want to do. So thank you for everything. And I'm sorry if you can hear the police sirens in the background.
I
Um,
don't forget.
Awesome. So maybe that can kind of lead us into community. I know we all kind of find community in the AIS, but in addition to that, do you have any experiences where architecture has kind of played a significant role in transforming community? Maybe if you want to share some specifics, please do. The floor is kind of yours. If you want to talk about a project or anything that you've done, we'd love to hear.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the people I met at AIS, obviously AIS facilitated community, are the people that I've gone on to do some really incredible stuff with. Um, like Michael Risika, who runs the Young Architects podcast and conference, was the first person to call me back up from South Africa as a keynote speaker at the Young Architects Conference in Portland, Oregon. And as a result of that, I grew my network incredibly within the field. Folks from that conference have gone on to write articles about my work in Architizer and ArcDaily and Archinet and stuff like that. So it's really broadened my horizons. I got to work with Zach, who we built the Ubuntu Architecture Summer Abroad with. So yeah, like community has sort of been everything within the world of architecture. And then there's a guy called Josh Sanabria who started something called Go Architect, and I've worked with him, and we went to school together too. I've worked with him on several projects, and he's like an older brother that we still connect with. So, and I think then in a way, with what we're trying to do with the Grind Tea is we're trying to create that same AIS community where people can look out for each other, which I think sometimes it ends as soon as we leave college, so you don't have insights into like maybe a firm, etc. So how do we democratize that and use a digital platform where you can go check SOM in comparison to HK? Oh, I'm forgetting the names of these firms. Whatever it is, right? Like, but how do we find good fits uh, into the next workplace? AIS is cool because you can do like the firm crawl, like firm visits and stuff like that. But once you've graduated, you can't just like randomly walk up to a firm to check what it's like, right? So this digital platform kind of replaces that with grindtea.com.
Absolutely. And it almost like implies a kind of mentorship that there's somebody that's going to tell you the truth or there's somebody that's going to tell you
Yeah.
their lived experiences, which is kind of a really great thing about organizations and this kind of community that we're talking about as well. So that's the impression that I've gotten of it also. And I really commend you for all the work you've done in that space. Absolutely. And especially when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, those kind of things require mentorship even more than just the average kind of professional development.
Yes, and I 100% agree because when you think about it, right, like stats go like the minority turnover is 20% higher. And then women in middle management live their workplaces at twice the rate of men. And then women in C-suite executive live their workplaces at 4 times the rate of men. Now, does why are they leaving? Why is it us, people of color and women leaving? Is it because we're lazy? um, and then I was talking at a TV interview recently where I was like, I spent a good 5 to 6 years studying architecture, pulling all-nighters, don't pull all-nighters, and all of that to just leave the workplace. So no, these people are not leaving their professions. they're leaving toxic workplaces where they can no longer thrive. Now, how do we ensure that the next workplace they go to is an inclusive one where they're truly valued? And that's where this platform sort of plays a role, where they can now sort of learn from others' experiences, whether or not this is a workplace where they're valued or where they belong.
Yeah, I'd love for to ask you to expand on how you mentioned that students shouldn't pull all-nighters. This is kind of something that we've been talking about at the AIS a lot, and kind of health and well-being, not just for students, but it kind of connects back to all these things you've been discussing of like poor workplace conditions. If students are overworked while they're in school and encouraged to pull all-nighters and do whatever they need to do to get it done, of course, that's kind of the sentiment that they'll be taking into their workplace. So I would love to hear your thoughts about this whole kind of movement.
It's a good question. Um, all-nighters are not worth it in the long run. They're not worth it for your health. Um, they're not worth it for your structure, discipline, um, for future. Because now, if you're used to like waiting till an all-nighter, that's going to be problematic within your work. Um, and ultimately, like I don't even think they're not worth it for the quality of the work that you produce. So I think it's a toxic trait that we need to read architecture schools of. And I think it's even more toxic that I feel like there's professors who encourage it. And a lot of the professors who encourage these things, it's not because they like them, but it's like a form of hazing. They're saying, "Oh, we went through this, so you should too." And when they went through it, they hated it as much as you do, right? So one of the things we're thinking about at Grind T is creating like a college version of the rating platform so that you can know which colleges have toxic studio cultures versus not, so that you know where to go. But if you're not interested in that, let me know. But yeah, man, it's just ultimately it's never worth it.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. And maybe kind of given all that, and in the spirit of mentorship and kind of engaging with our students, do you have any kind of recommendations for maybe books or podcasts or kind of anything that you'd like to share for our students to kind of learn more?
Yeah, I could share a book on inclusion that I think would be very helpful. It was written by actually someone young, relatively our age, during apartheid South Africa. His name is Steve Biko, who was a medical student actually at the time. So he writes a book called I Write What I Like. That's the title of the book. I Write What I Like. And this was when Nelson Mandela was in prison. So there was a leadership vacuum, and sort of the apartheid government was leading. And this young college student sort of took it upon himself to sort of carry the baton and the movement forward. And I think he's just such a great testament that, and you know, President Obama puts this like, there's no other person or other time. You're the ones we've been waiting for. You're the change that we seek. And I think that book is great in helping us understand inclusion, helping us understand other cultures and how to be respectful, but it's also great in helping us see another young person sort of take a stand in sort of like the most fierce conditions possible and bring about change.
Yeah,
That
absolutely.
I write what I like.
Mhm. Great. Thank you so much for sharing that. I definitely appreciate that. And I know our everyone watching and listening will as well. I also just want to kind of give you the stage if you there's anything specific you'd like to mention that I haven't asked you about, or maybe any projects you've worked on or things that you want to kind of bring to light and share with everyone listening.
Um, I think we've covered everything. So definitely check out. I think people. I'd love obviously people to go check out grindt.com to check out the places they've either worked at or they're looking to work at. I think it'd be a useful tool. Um, and yeah, so we're constantly on tour with the anti-racist hot dog. So if we're coming to a city near you, let us know. I know we will be in Ireland from the 5th to the 8th of October, and then we'll be in Portland, Oregon for the normal conference, and then we'll be in New York, 14th to the 18th, and they'll be Washington, D.C., 18 to 20. So if you're any of these places, hit us up on Instagram at Wandile Ubuntu, that's one word, or at Anti-Racist Hot Dog, or at Grind Tea. But yeah.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Wandile, for joining us. I really appreciate the time you taking the time to chat with our students, to share some of your experiences. I've always been so inspired by you and kind of your story and your work. So I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yo, thank you very much, Julia, for having me. And I'm really proud of everything you guys are doing, and you're sort of pushing AIS in the right direction. I'm really excited to all the amazing things you'll do.
Great. Thank you so much.